Researching medieval culinary recipes with digital humanities methods, the cooking recipes of the Middle Ages project. Our chair is Professor Rosie Song, a professor in Hispanic Studies in the School of Modern Languages and Culture at Durham University in the UK, but she taught all over the world in so many different places that I can't remember. It's not a joke. And among her publications, there are A Taste of Barcelona, The History of Catalan Cooking and Eating, 2019, and Lost in Transition, Constructing Memory in Contemporary Spain, 2016.
Yeah, that's good.
Even if it would be just enough.
That's good. Yeah.
Probably, the culmination of such a wonderful career is being the principal investigator of the RELISH project, about which maybe Rosie wants to say a couple of words very quickly, and I'll let you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Simone, for that introduction. And before I introduce the panelists, I wanted to briefly thank the organizers again for the workshop, Simone and Claudia and the UNISG for hosting us. It's been a lot of work behind the scenes, as you can imagine. And I was also very sorry to have missed the opportunity to present the project a little bit yesterday when we had our opening sort of reception. We had some traveling mishap happening. But a hearty laughter there. But anyway, thank you so much for being here. It has been really inspiring and enlightening to hear your work and to share in this space these ideas. We're very happy to tell you that we have finished the bureaucratic implementation of the project. Janita Van Dyke here, the postdoc that is supporting this project as well. And we have our website, relisheu.org, and we have just finished uploading some documents that is published as well in Cordis. So we have finished a critical framework for the project. So if you are more curious about how this project was conceived and programmed and some of the tasks and objectives, please check out the documentation. We are due to publish a few more items related to the project, so you can follow that platform and also just find through our QR code. I left some cards related to the project. I'm also happy to answer any further questions that you might have during these 2 days that we are together sharing this conversation. So I don't want to take any more time. So let me introduce you today, my colleague, Daniel Newman. He's actually my office neighbor, also my faculty mentor.
Back at you.
Yeah, there you go. We mentor each other. Daniel Newman holds the chair of Arabic Studies at the University of Durham in the United Kingdom. His research interests include Arabic travel literature, 19th century Arab reform movements, Islamic medicine, and medieval Arab culinary history. He is the author of the best-selling An Imam in Paris, account of a stay in France by an Egyptian cleric, 1826 to 1831, and was the co-recipient of the World Award of the President of the Republic of Tunisia for Islamic studies for the book entitled Muslim Women in Law and Society. His book, The Sultan's Feast, a 15th century cookbook, was longlisted for the Peter Mackenzie Smith Book Prize in 2021 and received the Gourmand World Cookbook Award in 2021. His most recent book is The Exile's Cookbook, Medieval Gastronomic Treasures from Al-Andalus and North Africa. His research was showcased in a 6-part Al Jazeera series on the history of medieval Arab food. He maintains a blog, eatlikeasultan.com, it's great, and Instagram account, Medieval Arab Cooking, where he shares his passion for bringing medieval Arab dishes to life by recreating recipes. Thank you so much, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Rosie. And thank you to everybody here for attending the last, I believe, session of the day, for staying the full course. And I'd also like to, like Rosie, thank the organizers, so Simone and Claudia, for all their wonderful work and making everything run so smoothly. I wish KLM was in their hands. So today I'm going to present research, and it's conducted actually by my co-author, Professor Mikros from the University of Athens. And we're going to look at a different way, for the first time actually, in terms of Arabic recipes. We're going to look at a different way of analyzing them. Now, the medieval Arabic culinary tradition is, bar none, the most extensive and varied corpus of gastronomic literature from the medieval world. And the number of extant cookery manuals bears this out, as does the wide geographical dispersion. So we have recipes from Muslim Spain, Al-Andalus, all the way up to Iraq, via North Africa, Egypt, and also Greater Syria. The chronological breadth is very impressive, in fact, from the 9th to the 15th centuries. So for a number of centuries, the Arabs, the Arabic speakers, were in fact the only people that were writing cookery books and recipes. They were only preceded by a very, very select and very small group of culinary manuals. Chronologically, we have Apicius, which is the man himself, of course, lived earlier, but the compilation dates probably from the 4th century. We have about, well, not about, exactly 499 recipes. And we have some isolated recipes in the books, agricultural manuals, such as that by Cato, for instance, Columella. But these are mainly fragments, hardly anything from classical Greece. And in fact, we can go back even earlier, and then we end up in exactly the same region in ancient Mesopotamia, where in the kind of 18th century before the Christian era, we have 35 recipes. That is basically it, before the Arabic culinary tradition really burst onto the scene with an amazing number of recipes. In fact, it's one of the many mysteries of the medieval Arabic literary tradition. So we don't really have some trials and then a gradual increase in number of recipes and the scope of the cookery books. All of a sudden, we've got a cookery book that's got nearly 500 recipes. Now, there are about 50 compilations that we're aware of and that are mentioned in secondary literature, but only 10 have survived, at least are known to have survived, to the present day. A total of 43 manuscripts, 15 only of which are dated. The oldest from 1226, which is also the only autograph. The most recent from 1856. So this tells us a little bit about the length of this tradition and how it was still very much alive in the 19th century, where people were copying medieval cookery books. But that, as they say, is a tale for another day. The manuscripts are found in a wide range of libraries, many countries. So I've listed them here: Oxford, Helsinki, etc. So both in the West and the Arabic-speaking world, and even in India, the Bankipur library in Patna. Modern editions have been published for all but 2 of these collections, but many of these editions fall short of the accepted scholarly standards in terms of editing manuscript texts. Now, despite the richness of this material, modern research has remained generally within a very narrow descriptive framework, and often neglecting the textual relationships and intertextual dynamics among recipes and sources, and very little or no robust quantitative analysis. The present study seeks to help redress this gap through the application of advanced natural language processing techniques. And these quantitative methods enable new avenues of inquiry into the structure, transmission, and thematic organization of these texts in the medieval Arabic world, and beyond, of course, as this will open up new avenues of research into connections between the Arabic culinary tradition and subsequent European sources. So the combined total of recipes found in the sources approaches 4,500. But this figure includes not only food preparations, but also non-culinary items such as perfumes, hand washes, and medical concoctions. However, a word of caution here, we can't really dismiss these categories altogether, because in some cases the differences between, say, medicinal recipes and culinary recipes is very blurred. In fact, we can divide it into recipes that are purely for medical purposes, and then we have those that are really only for food, and then there's a large group where it's somewhere in the middle. And this is all part of the prevailing orthodoxy, which is that medicine should taste good. Remember Galen, the great Galen, said, every doctor has to be a good chef. If only that were the case today. I hesitate to say on KLM. But let us not tarry into these peregrinations of aviation. In addition to the dedicated culinary treatises, we can also find a significant number of recipes in a number of other sources. So medical and pharmacological encyclopedia. In one example of a pharmacological encyclopedia from the 11th century, there are about 220 culinary recipes. Now, it's not to say that we have those numbers in all of them, but even the great Ibn Sina will refer to recipes and dishes, of course, primarily from a medicinal point of view. And then we have cookery-related information, including recipes found in more unusual and surprising sources, such as the manuals that were made for market inspectors. And the market inspectors, of course, needed to know how something was made in order to be able to punish, or rather identify first, and then punish any fraudulent traders, unscrupulous traders, that were, for instance, substituting one ingredient for another. So again, unusual source. And then there's also classical literature. There are many examples of, for instance, recipe poems, which also function very much as recipes and can actually be cooked. If we add all of those together, it goes up by probably, and this is just a rough estimate, by about 500. Now, establishing and analyzing historical Arabic culinary recipes entails numerous methodological challenges, arising both from the nature of the sources and the particular characteristics of Arabic manuscript culture. These challenges diverge significantly from the text-critical approaches that have traditionally governed the editing of classical, in practice, Greco-Roman texts. Jan Just Whitcomb, the Dutch codicologist, in 1988 wrote a seminal article entitled Establishing the Stemma, Fact or Fiction, and in 2013 he wrote a sequel, The Philologist's Stone, The Continuing Search for the Stemma. And it critically interrogated the applicability of traditional European philological models, particularly those developed by Blackman, Maas, and in Italy here, of course, Pasquali, for constructing the Stemmata Codicum. Now, the genealogical trees of manuscript descent, and applying those principles to the editing of manuscripts in Arabic, not just in Arabic, but also Persian and Turkish. And there are many differences between the corpora of antiquity and Arabic literature. Now, the stemmatic approach essentially relies on two foundational conditions. One, the original autograph has been lost, and two, a considerable chronological gap separates the original composition from the earliest surviving copies. This has been applied to things like Hippocrates, or the Hippocratic corpus, I should say, is a kind of typical example. But we can actually add a number of other factors. And that is that the chronological gap in the case of Arabic, as I've just mentioned when talking about the range of manuscript copies, often can be 1,000 years. So manuscript was still being produced in the 19th century. And secondly, which is also relevant to culinary texts, many manuscripts were commissioned, especially the later ones, by Western scholars and collectors, which in some cases, of course, added another layer of codicological complexity, as the text was subject to alterations by copyists seeking to comply with their paymasters' expectations. Reconstruction of the original text, therefore, relies on the comparison of multiple manuscript witnesses to infer a hypothetical archetype. But this method, while theoretically all nice and dandy, fails to account for the realities of Islamic manuscript transmission. Many Arabic works survive in only one manuscript, others in dozens or even hundreds of copies. So rather than a linear descent from a single archetype, these manuscripts often exhibit textual fluidity shaped by oral transmission, scribal interpolation, or authorial revision. In cases where only one manuscript survives, the systematic method, of course, is inapplicable. Moreover, later editors frequently introduced alterations or corrections without reference to earlier witnesses, thereby distancing printed editions from the original. Conversely, large and composite works, like, for instance, the Arabian Nights in Arabic, Elf Layla wa Layla, the 1001 Nights, is a paradigmatic example, surviving in so many overlapping versions that the construction of a coherent stemma is simply humanly and technologically impossible. In such cases, it's the very abundance of material that obscures rather than illuminates the archetype. And then we have the issue of access. Many manuscripts remain lost, incomplete, inaccessible, or poorly catalogued, or uncatalogued in some cases. Indeed, the culinary texts offer an interesting test case, with many more copies no doubt hiding in libraries and private collections. I myself have been fortunate to have identified one new copy of a known text and an entirely new culinary text. A final important element is that the challenges were exacerbated by the delayed adoption of print in the Islamic world, which only goes back to 1822 in Egypt. Now, there were prior attempts in the 18th century, but these were very minor and limited to some religious works in the Lebanon. So printing really in earnest began only in the 19th century. And as we've seen, the manuscript copying remained a very prolific cottage industry. Now, this, of course, has implications to the editorial method, and we can have a whole discussion about the so-called closed recension model, which assumes traceable descent among manuscript copies. You know, the famous, if we have manuscript A, B, and C, and there is an edition in B which is then copied by C, then A automatically must be the oldest one. This, of course, is logically a total nonsense, or a fiction which unfortunately has been perpetrated throughout the edition of texts from antiquity. The other issues that we need to address in Arabic culinary recipes, the genre, as I've just indicated, is very heterogeneous. Texts are embedded in a variety of as a result, okay, right. Without further ado, let's move on then to. Good Lord, is that true? 5? Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun, I dare say. So, for this particular study, we isolated 4 research questions related to ingredient diversity, core versus periphery, so what do we find at the center of the recipes and what's on the outer region, the outliers, so to speak. Then we have cooking methodology and ingredient correlations, which is very important and, to the best of my knowledge, not something that's been tried to this day. And then, of course, diachronic and regional effects. The corpus is this. So we have one from the 13th century, which is also the only autograph, by al-Baghdadi. Then we have a 13th century book from Muslim Spain, which also includes recipes from Northern Africa. Then we have a 15th century cookery book from Syria and a 15th century cookery book, The Sultan's Feast, that my colleague just referred to as our fourth member. And so essentially what we did, so first thing, of course, is to establish the best text. The best text here, not in terms of finding a stemma, but the best text as in the maximal version. So relying on all of the manuscripts, in case there was more than one, and really extracting all of the recipes that could be extracted, then translating those recipes, identifying the ingredients correctly, and then putting it into a spreadsheet for statistical analysis. This raised a number of questions, again, that are very typical of the culinary literature. Firstly, the ingredients, of course. Ingredients today are not the ingredients from 1,000 years ago. Not even the use of the parts of the ingredients. Secondly, the amount of synonymy, where different regions, different regional dialects impacted on the terminology. So a number of things to take care of. And then, in order to facilitate the analysis, we normalized the ingredients. So, for instance, coriander seed, coriander juice, fresh coriander, dried coriander, coriander full stop, all fell under the umbrella term of coriander. And so we paid particular attention, of course, getting the right number of recipes. And we ended up with 1,174 in total. But once we then looked at the recipes, a number of recipes were included because for instance, cookery methods, there were no cookery methods, and of course, in order to facilitate comparison, you need to have certain fields populated. So let's take a look at one research question, the first one, ingredient diversity. So we used a number of statistical analyses in order to look at the distribution. And we have a problem with the length of the cookery books. That's something that seems obvious, but statistically and technically, that's not that easy to solve, that you have different lengths of books, and so the number of times an ingredient appears, of course, that doesn't automatically mean that this ingredient was widely used, because if it's a book of more than 400 recipes versus one of 100. And so we have this box plot which provides this comparative visualization of ingredients, ingredient counts per recipe. So let me go straight to the conclusions. So for Ibn Mubarak Shah, which is the Egyptian cookery book, the median ingredient count is approximately 7. And an overall range from 2 to 24 ingredients in a recipe, and several outliers exceed 15 ingredients. So this profile, this is where it becomes interesting, how do we analyze that, suggests that the majority of recipes are concise and streamlined, and indicating a text that balances everyday dishes with more elaborate preparations, which is borne out by the biographical details we, in this case, happen to have. In that individual, that's exactly what he wants to do. The Iraqi one, for instance, reveals a significantly richer ingredient profile with a median of roughly 10 ingredients per recipe and a range from 3 to 22. The Andalusian one, similar to the Iraqi one, is more complex And in terms of number of ingredients, we're between 9 and 10, and a range stretching from 1 to 28 ingredients. A large number of outliers, and again, it reveals that we have a recipe collection that reflects a courtly elite cuisine, which is true for many of them. If we then look at, oh dear. I'm done. Right, so let me quickly show you the kinds of things that we did. So here, for instance, we have rarefaction. Rarefaction is a very interesting technique. It comes from biology in terms of the presence of animals. But you can also do it to recipes. So it's again that thing, you see 2 rabbits in an area of 10 square feet, and you see 10 rabbits or 100 rabbits, even an area of 1,000 square feet. This involves a lot of scaling in order to interpret that data correctly. And so this is how it looks, and these are some of the results. So what we can say in terms of diversity and cookery methods, we have an interesting comparison. And that is that chronology is not as important as one might imagine, and that cooking methodology is actually a very powerful indicator. Incidentally, in previous research, we were able to predict the inclusion of an ingredient to this or that manual with a certainty of over 82%. So we're hoping that with this additional use of techniques, here we have the most common ingredients in the cookery books. Again, warmer colors means more. Note here the key spices that again mark a highly regional difference. The use of water here, yes, there's a lot of boiling, there's a lot of stewing, but we have to be careful because every single type of meat would require boiling, because obviously, unlike we who buy it at the supermarket and it is already, they needed to tenderize it. So the boiling is always involved. That's another area that needs to be looked at. And so here we were able to actually look at the ingredients that are marked in the technical sense or can be coded to individual authors. Here we have again the overlap, which showed up some very interesting pictures. Trust me, as you can see, the picture is very interesting. And what it shows is even more interesting. So the overlap is quite interesting. So the Andalusian one overlaps with the Iraqi one, but not so much with the others. The Egyptian one overlaps with the Iraqi one, and the Syrian one is more or less on its own, yet, which doesn't make, it's not that surprising, but it is the only one that isn't part of the elite cuisine, yet it contains a number of ingredients that are quite surprising. Once again, if you tabulate this, if you just look at them, you wouldn't see that. And here again, we have a beautiful heat map, which, yes, and... So cooking associations, as I was saying, toasting, if I could just mention this, when I coded the ingredients, this is something that needs to be looked at, I coded the cooking methods used in the recipes, but only once. Now, in modern cooking, that's not a big problem, but they had multiple methods. So you could have boiling, frying, boiling of another ingredient, stewing, baking, and then we're going to put the first ingredient back into the oven. So in order to get an accurate picture, and here we have an example where at the moment that's what I'm looking at because it doesn't make sense. Toasting appears disproportionately represented, whereas in fact they didn't toast very much. They weren't big toasters. So they toasted flour, sesame seeds, almonds, but not really as much as the model would indicate because that needs to be further fine-tuned. Here we have the comparisons with the ingredients and methods. Then the chronological one, of course, is fascinating, but I'll just have to You just have to wait till you read the paper, but I can guarantee you won't be disappointed. And again, a beautiful heat map, experiment with different colors here. Regional distribution. Oh, we have another good one here, cassia. Cassia, of course, is a type of cinnamon. The true cinnamon is cinnamon. But the terminological confusion is such that cinnamon could be cassia and cassia could be cinnamon. And even in Arabic, they use 3 terms to talk about what was either the cinnamon. The cassia is the cheaper variety. True cinnamon from Ceylon is the most expensive and best quality. And so the future, I haven't even dealt with the past, and I'm lagging behind the present. So the future is to expand the corpus, which is what I'm doing now, expanding it to non-Arabic collections, and that I think will, and I'll be working with the good people at Fundación Alicia. So I'm hoping, for instance, Andalusia, so Muslim Spain, the Catalan cookery books, of course, will throw up some fantastic data. And then here are some of the research questions that I'm also looking at, and especially the first one, which I've already done a pilot on, and which really offers very promising analyses.
Thank you so much.
Great.
So, I run a tight ship.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Yes. So while Daniel is vacating the space, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker. This is really a big pleasure to me to introduce Helmut, who was part of our project at the beginning, and he was incredibly generous with his ideas, with his time, when we were in the process of putting sort of relish together at in the earlier version of this. It was used to be called Terp. It wasn't the yeah. Thank you. So it's great to welcome Helmut to this space where we can hear his incredible work behind Korima and other projects. So Helmut Klug is the Research Data Management Coordinator at the University of Graz Library, where he heads the support desk, the university's RDM training and the data steward course. Before that, he worked as a researcher at the University of Graz, deeply rooted in digital humanities, German medieval studies, and cultural history, focusing on culinary traditions of the Middle Ages. And as a project, we're still benefiting from his great work. So thank you so much, Helmut, for your generosity, kindness, and for your time for being here with us today. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for the nice introduction. As Rosie said, I will present the cooking recipes of the Middle Ages project, Korima for short. And in this project, we set out to make available the early New High German cooking recipes before 1530. Initially, we started with the magic number 1500, but somewhere along the way, we met Barbara De Nicolo, who will present tomorrow, and she added 30 years to our project, not in work, but in text, and I'm really grateful for that. So, yes, the initial situation before the project was that we had some individual editions of cooking recipes from 1890s onwards, but these have really different and sometimes really bad quality. We had no digitized or hardly any digitized manuscripts. We had hardly no digital texts besides some private text collections. So our goal was to provide this. And we wanted to have that because we wanted to do semi-automated analysis and a systematic research. The main problem with the corpus is that we are dealing with early New High German, and this means that we do not have standardized spelling. And This again means that in our corpus of about 5,000 recipes, we have, for the term apple, about 80 different spellings. So it's hardly possible to compare this with machine analysis if you don't know what it is. And the problem of the spelling also goes hand in hand with our initial aim to have a cross-language comparison. And for us, or for the center I worked at this date, our solution was a philologically grounded digital scholarly edition. And the problem we had led to a very comprehensive workflow, which I don't want to get into with details. I want to say that this workflow, various steps, leads to two products we then use in the publication of our data. The first is that we have meticulous transcription of the historic texts, which leads to the base on which we build the annotation, the semantic annotation, and obviously the second result are the annotated texts, and these are the basis for the machine-aided analysis. Looking back at the 3.5 years of the project, it was lots and lots of tedious work, but looking at what we managed to do, I think that every minute we took there was worth the effort. So the basis, and this is what I want to concentrate on, the Corrimer semantic model, is the basis for the text annotation. When thinking about how we could reach a point where we can use the model for annotating our medieval texts, we were in Bamberg, and you know Bamberg, the city of beer, greatly helped in developing a model in one evening, which in the end really did work out, and that's the most important thing. So we focused on modeling the recipes with a really high level of detail, the one side. The other side was that we wanted to have a model that could be applied to a broad range of texts, from medical recipes, household texts, or even modern recipe texts. We did want to stick to the DH standards, but we did not want to be restricted by them. So we early on decided that we will make up our own model, which on the technical side is ruled by a schema and can easily be translated in the text modeling standards of the text encoding initiative. So basically we were with this on the safe side. The other positive side is that the model is excessively human readable on the one hand, and of course it's machine readable. So the model can be described from different points of view, as you can see on the slide. The summary for that could be that we use the TI for the text on the one hand, and we have a whole range of new elements to annotate the text for the culinary information. And I want to go through these elements with you now. The TI XML standard excels at modeling the texts in a general way, and particularly in the text structure. When we look at our output, we have in the TI XML file the TI header, which basically each file has to have, where we have project information, the manuscript description, and the document information. The body holds the text, and it's the model is so flexible as we want it to be, so we can deal with big manuscripts or holding one, big collections holding one recipe to our bigger collections with about 300 recipes. So this is not a problem. The recipes are annotated and marked up with the relevant metadata, and when we look at the structural elements, you can see the classic DI elements, the division, the anonymous block, a title of a recipe, opening and closing phrases, and you see here the instructions. This is something that will keep popping up on the next slides. We also have elements for text in the collections, but text that is not part of a recipe or is a recipe. We have milestones and page beginning elements which bind our digital output back into the manuscripts, and this is basically what the whole project was about. We wanted to have a digital version from which we always can go back to the ground truth, and the ground truth are the manuscripts where the recipes are written down. Yeah, and there are a couple of other recipes, elements which, yeah, well, we basically need it. So going further from the structural elements to the culinary elements, I want to start with the three core elements, which become core elements because they are annotated with information from the semantic web. And this information from semantic web is what helps us pull the historical context into the modern realm. So we can discuss about if this is necessary or if it helps. I think it helps. We have annotated ingredients, tools, and dishes with concepts from Wikidata, which at the moment, or which generally is a very broad ontology. Here again, we find the instructions, as you can see, because we started out with saying, okay, ingredients, tools, dishes, that's what we need to compare the recipes. It works, but it would even work better if we could compare the instructions, because the instructions are these parts of the texts who tell the people reading it, doing the recipe, what they have to do. The problem here is that with the three other elements, it was easy to find the concept we can use. If we say apple, it could be any apple, any historical apple. But we could not, or we cannot do this with the instructions, because with the instructions we have to go into the historic realm, and we have to have a concept that really shows us what is meant with this instruction, if it's a complicated one, and I basically think that 80% of the instructions is add this, which is easy, but it's the other 20% that was a problem. We started with a thesaurus on, or a vocabulary list on this, but we didn't finish it. It simply was too much work for the project period. So we still have the instructions, and they are now finally here on the slide of the other culinary elements, where we focus on the knowledge besides the bare minimum of information. And the information that is annotated with these elements binds together the bare facts, the tools, ingredients, dishes, and forms these bare facts into a narrative with which we, or the people, the historical people, could have worked. And we also can narrow down the culinary information. Maybe I go back again. We have the instructions. We have the alternatives. We've been talking about the alternatives. It's a really important concept in the medieval recipes. Information about time, time in regard to cooking. We have kitchen tips, which tell us something special about cooking that goes beyond the basic instruction. And we have the serving tip, which gives us information on plating and stuff like that. Then from here we go to a broader scale of the realm of the household, preserving tips, for example, and with the dietetics element, we annotated everything that has to do with information on medicine, basically. And finally, on the bottom of the list, but not unimportant, are elements that focus on the information that provides a broader context, elements that provide information that goes beyond the simple description of cooking processes and even beyond the narrative, and elements that focus on the people behind the text. And here I want to take out the speech element, which we used for that. We only have a very, very few instances where we used it, but these are passages of texts where you can hear the historical person speaking. It's not an information that has anything to do with the recipe, and it's bringing the people and their cultural context into the recipes. Yes. What was it? It's an image here, an image depicting XML text. You probably can imagine how that looks like. I had it in the Oxygen software, which makes it orange, brown, blue, and black. The recipe would show you how we annotated an example of how you cook a white hedgehog, and how we applied the elements there. It's not important. What is important is that if with this data we have the human readability, we have the machine readability, and the XML is the basis for everything else that you can find on the website. And now I'm, yes.
Okay. Want to go into the...
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So it's a good...
Showing either on the left.
Yeah, I don't know what happened here. I hope I can remember. So you can also have the URL for the project, which I didn't include in the PowerPoint. So this is what comes from the XML. You have the landing page here with the collection of the manuscripts. You have, how do I go on? You have the normalized text with the recipes. You can highlight in this text ingredients, tools, and whatever annotation we have in this collection. But you can go further. You can go to an index of the recipes, which you can search for. So you get all the recipes that are for the famous hedgehog recipes. You have different models of analysis, from a full text search to different indices, to, in the end, an API where you can take grab our data. So, going back. That's the Wi-Fi password if you don't have it. So, yeah. Yeah, I skip the not available images. To this slide, we tried some attempts at researching the recipes. About this you can read in the paper. And as a last information, I want to tell you what's there on the website and what isn't, because we basically finished the work in the project Durham. So we have all the stuff we wanted in a digital form, but not all of that is online. So, and not all of this is online with the full annotation. So we have online 60 collections, about 2,300 recipes that are fully annotated with the whole range of elements. We have 11 collections that are partially annotated with the 3 most important elements. We have 30 collections that are offline and partially annotated. These are online only in transcription form, so you have the text at least. Yeah, and there's some stuff we didn't do at all for various reasons. So this is something that I keep on my hard drive for some time later. And in the first session, I was thinking, when we were discussing recipes, I was thinking, how does this project relate to this discussion? And I basically, for me, came up with the realization that our model is a record of the knowledge of one person in a certain cultural setting at one point of time. And this is what we try to model with our Corrimal semantic model. And yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You can talk a bit more. 1 minute. Thank you so much.
Now, I'm going to be very, very cheeky. How much did this cost? How much institutional support have you had for storing things indefinitely, 50 years perhaps? And how many people were working on doing the back-end data entry and things like that? Sorry for my cheekiness.
No. So you can hear me? Yes, I can hear me too. Yeah, it's easy. I think we were about 380,000 euros in the Austrian part of the project. We had about, I don't know, 250,000 euros on the French side of the project, which I've not been talking about because we didn't have any digital output. On the Austrian side, we had a project team of between 3 and 5 people. It was varying, but we had the tech guy was there from the beginning until the end, and the other colleagues came and went according to what had to be done. There was no institutional support. That's not true. There was the institutional support from the repository where the data is hosted, which came with the project. Yeah, that basically should be my answer to your question. You're looking at it.
It's you.
Well, just me.
Just you.
Just me.
I mean, that's a big accomplishment.
So, old school, up until the statistical wizardry, old school, and of course, really over the years, transcribing and putting in spreadsheets whenever a spare half an hour presented itself. And that also included, even in terms of institutional support, that even included sometimes purchasing manuscripts from my own pocket. So it's just me.
It's really astonishing, isn't it?
And you know, this is ironically just the beginning. As you see, the future is really. I'm hoping to, in the foreseeable future, still in my lifetime, I'm hoping, which is increasingly being shortened by KLM. I'm hoping to complete the Arabic corpus, and for instance, the Latin corpora. Admittedly, they're not a big. I've done those as well. I've done the Mesopotamian ones. Again, not very big, but this is very old school. So this is not AI nonsense, because the recipes are not. They don't always represent themselves, as Helmut explained. It's not like reading a modern recipe. In modern recipes, I think we could easily scrape in about 3 hours, provided I have my tools, we can scrape a couple of million recipes or more. With historical recipes, because of the medium being the big problem, and then there's the linguistic issues, which I've only touched upon. But so, yes, it's been a one-man band, and I don't expect it to be anything other than that when it comes to the processing plus normalization terminology. And of course, it helps that I'm also linking, so whenever I edit a text or translate a text, of course, I then have something that I can turn into a spreadsheet.
So, I was wondering if there was any criticism or pushback from other academics, other scholars, and I'm thinking partly this sounds very similar in many ways to the tail type and motif indexes that were being developed in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and a lot of that was coming out of Romantic nationalism in Europe and was heavily criticized as being very reductionist. So I'm just wondering if there's any pushback.
Well, I just want to add something I didn't mention. One of the things that to me was an eye-opener in terms of what's possible. And I said this is the tip of the iceberg. That's why I'm so excited about this project. Is that you're right about the fairy tales. I hadn't thought of that, but in a way there's a lot of similarities. But the thing that really, to me, was a very important line of inquiry was, I don't know if anybody's aware of authorship attribution, stylometry. And in a way, if you were to dig deeper and scratch a little bit, you would find that many of those principles are the principles that I apply. Because at the end of the day, they're also establishing a maximal corpus. They're looking at very much the things that Helmut and I look. In fact, Helmut looks at more things, and we're trying to do very similar. So, stylometry, author attribution. I mean, the works of people like Patrick Giola, if anybody knows him. Those kinds of approaches that they apply to novels, trying to work out who Ferrante is and so on. So that actually, but yeah, thank you for that point. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. The comparison with the fairy tales. Yeah.
Yeah. From my point of view, there wasn't any pushback, but you have had people and still have people who just don't use it. And stick to the old ways, and that's basically the problem, because it doesn't matter if you produce XML or if you produce spreadsheets. The most important thing is that it's digital, and with the digital medium you can do whatever you want. You can make a book in the end if you want, but if you make the book first, you have a problem for the research you want to do.
Can I just add something, because it's important? There has been pushback. It's those who. It's a little bit how transformational grammar was treated in the beginning. Some people just refuse to accept that it's there and stick so closely to what I call, no offense intended, the philosophical approach. Now, some of these collections I know by heart, and I don't consider myself a stupid person, but I wouldn't be able to do even 1% and arrive at 1% of these very important connections simply relying on my knowledge of the recipe, because the human brain doesn't work that way. So the pushback has come from people who almost want to pretend that this methodology doesn't exist. Often they're also the kinds of people who will, speak very loudly about the digital humanities, but then seem to be incapable of doing anything more than switching on their laptop. But that, as they say, is another story, like KLM.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you both. And I have two questions, one each. Helmut, my question for you was in terms of the manuscripts that you included in your project. Could you talk a little bit about the selection criteria around that?
We took everything. Well, basically that's true. But our selection criteria was handwritten cooking recipes before 1500. That was the selection criteria, handwritten because in 1485 we have the first printed version of a German cookbook, and we wanted to stick to the handwritten stuff because that's the major corpus. It's about 60 manuscripts, 60 collections of recipes.
So are you saying in terms of the extant known manuscript collections of recipes, you have all of those?
Yeah.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah. As David said earlier, there will be lots of stuff that has not been found until now. But I started on that with some kind of machine learning technology to walk through all the catalogs of the, at least the German libraries holding manuscripts, and I was looking through really bad scans and bad character recognition for stuff that goes that's interesting and that has any connection to cooking recipes. There is stuff to be found, and then there is stuff that is not labeled cooking recipes. It's something you could call trick recipes. You have them in the recipe collections, but you also have them outside. And one of such trick recipe would be to prepare a fish in 3 different ways. So cook it, roast it, and fry it. One whole fish.
Different parts.
Yes.
Yeah.
So and this goes under a completely different heading, or you just simply read recipes, and then you can medical, pharmaceutical, whatever. So you would have to search the catalogs, you would have to go to the manuscripts, look through the manuscripts, and I think there is still stuff to be found here.
Okay, thank you. And Daniel, my question for you is, that was a fantastic presentation, just, I suppose, kind of uncovering the depth of work and the complexity, but what you didn't talk about was your work in the practical side of things. And I wonder, could you tell us a little bit how you came to that? And then how that work has informed this work?
Oh, thank you. That's a beautiful question. My other side, my practical side, my other hat, my chef's hat, is that I recreate the dishes. That started as an entertainment, purely as an entertainment. I think every food historian here would at some point have thought, well, what are these things? I'm sure Helmut's tried some of them as well. Yeah. This proved very early on to be extremely helpful and illuminating. And I'll tell you why, very, very brief, just a couple of things. One, in terms of what I hinted at with the ingredients, where sometimes the ingredients could have different meanings. And you might say, well, a recipe that comes from Egypt, well, that would be the local dialect. Well, that wasn't often the case because these works were copied, and as I said, they moved around. It's a wonderful story of mobility of dishes. Incidentally, that fish cooked 3 ways, you can find it already in a 9th century in Arabic cookery books, and in the Vivandier as well. It really helped to, in a way, supplement the recipe. Secondly, it was very useful because the recipes, of course, often were written not by scholars or authors, but for a very practical reason, by fellow chefs, writing for their servants, preparing. And so the recipes often, if you just read them as if they're kind of a literary genre, it all makes sense. Once you start making them, you realize, no, this doesn't work. Because if you do this step after the first one, then you end up with sauce rather than, say, a thick porridge. So it has really helped me analyze the recipes, and it's actually filtered through also in identification of ingredients. Yeah, absolutely.
There was a question back by Andrea, before Janita, I think. Andrea,
Thank you both for the talk. I'm interested more in the methodology of the extracting of the ingredients. Which challenge did you find apart from the variation of ingredients, of combinations of words? Have you thought maybe of implicit ingredients that are not written, and how to handle all those things?
Can you say the first bit again? What you start? I didn't hear the very first.
The methodologies of extracting these entities, which techniques did you use? It was a manual work, classification, etc.
Yeah. Can I start?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the methodology is we are annotating all the information that is there, or we were annotating all the information that is there, and also the information that's not there, but we know should be there. I would need to give, I don't have an example of him. So that's the one side. We used a Python script with a lexicon behind it, which was the first step to machine-aided annotation. And then we had the notorious human in the loop, which you have now with the AI stuff, who was going through the recipes, correcting what the machine missed, what they interpreted wrongly. And in the end, you always need a human to check the stuff. It doesn't work any other way if you want data you can use for research. That's the one thing. The other thing which I noticed when you were talking about your statistics, when we are doing the statistics, we only count the ingredient once in a recipe. So an ingredient can be named up to 10 times in a recipe, but it's only just the one ingredient. Then we count it once. That's the other important stuff. Does this answer your question?
Yeah.
I'll continue on from there. So I did the same thing. So one ingredient, so if the ingredient mentions coriander 10 times, it's only once that it appears. The same thing with the methods. But as I indicated, there is a flaw in that approach because, and this is where knowing the text is very helpful, because I noticed that the linking, and this is why indeed you need that human factor, because I think any conclusions that you jump to would completely skew the results. In terms of the implicit one there, although I employed a maximal approach to the recipes, there I used a minimalist approach. So if a recipe said we're boiling, you need to boil the meat with the onions. Now boiling, of course, implies water, and water isn't mentioned. So in the terms, water does not appear. So that's a choice, and I always believe as long as you apply a choice consistently, it doesn't really affect the data. The other thing is that you might also be in danger of changing recipes because we're also dealing with historic terminology. And Helmut mentioned, different spellings, but also verbs tend to refer to different things. And so, for instance, I can use the reverse. So you're making bread. There's a lot of bread recipes. Often, everybody here, I'm sure, has an idea of how to make bread. And so often they don't mention key ingredients. What are the key ingredients to bread? We have flour, we have water, and we have usually salt, and then possibly yeast if we're going to make a leavened bread. So often the water wouldn't be mentioned, but they start talking about kneading. So you might say, well, yes, but surely water should be there. It should be there, but it's not included because the recipe really is the ultimate authority, at least in my research. So there I don't include it, but of course it's been very helpful in my recreations where often I was faced with this issue of missing ingredients. And so in my other analyses of the recipes, there of course I discuss that, but not in the looking at the ingredients and methodology and linking it, simply because I didn't want to skew the data, number one, and two, it really at the end of the day doesn't matter that much. You don't really miss out on much. That's my view.
Yeah, I remember one example from our texts, and this is when you have the phrase "make it yellow," and and you only could make your stuff yellow if you use saffron, and with this verb we do include the saffron because it's essential information of the recipe.
But can I just say there's a count that actually provides me with a wonderful counterexample. Okay. Actually, it wasn't just saffron. Just like today, they would often use safflower. Yeah. That was the cheap and cheerful version of making it. So you're making a supposition. Yes. So in order to avoid these things, just like with the, is it cinnamon or is it cassia? Yeah. But so here, in fact, in many cases, probably half the cases in certain recipes, it would have been safflower and not saffron.
I'm not so sure about that because we do not have any recipes which tell us about the other ingredient.
Okay.
About
safflower. Okay.
We decided on taking on or taking the verb as an ingredient because anytime when stuff is made yellow, it's either only with the verb or with saffron. So we do not have...
So safflower didn't occur. No, okay, right. Yeah, that's a good enough reason. Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. If there was a second version, we couldn't have done it. So, yeah.
Andrea Borghi.
Wow, this has been so much fun listening to the two of you. But I missed Daniel's presentation, which is so I'm really sorry. But I have a question that maybe I would like to go to both of you. And it relates also to the project, right? So I'm thinking here, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, how do we go deeper with respect to each recipe? And how do we go broader in the sense of linking projects, right? So I would like to hear a bit from each of you. So when I say deeper, I mean that now, for example, the two of you were describing what I would call like a possibility sphere around the recipe. You have a recipe text, in this case is a text, and then you have a sphere of possibility of how to fill it out, right? It could be water, maybe it's not exactly water, it could be water with something else, or salty water, or whatever it is, right? Or it could be saffron, or something else that plays a similar function. But then some of the items you described for people that do, I don't know, history of botany, right? It could be really interesting to add information about that, or what kind of function, culinary function they play in a meal, So one could add. So I would like to see if you had to refine, right, to go deeper, how can you do that? What is the best strategy? And then for linking, if you have thought also about that, because I was thinking if you go from XML, right, how can you, from that, how can you, for example, use also Daniel's work and try to start drawing comparisons and see. Of course, there is a lot of noise because as you were describing now, words, so maybe you can try to have maybe a machine and then a person checking, if they're real comparisons or not, but trying to find these links would be really neat. Is also what we have to try to do in the project, I think. So I don't know if you have any strategies to offer here. I don't know even if it's clear, the question.
For me, this is where the linked open data comes in. So we could easily link via the ingredients. I don't know if you have tools or
No.
Okay, so we can link via the ingredients. If there's sometime a vocabulary on the instructions in the Gorham project, then we probably could link via this combination. So and with the open data, the linked open data information, you also can do this linking automatically. At the moment, we can only talk about in how many ways we could prepare fish, for example, or how we can color our dishes. But once you're digital, you can do everything you want. You can compare. You can have automated translations from the early New High German and from the Arabic into English, and then compare the text. So the smallest common denominator is the digital medium, and then you will have to look where you can go into more detail. That's the linking, and for me, going deeper into the recipes would mean to have what we have for the ingredients, tools, and dishes, namely a vocabulary, a thesaurus, and ontology for the instructions. This is the most important next step.
Yes. I mean, I agree. I mean, at the minute when I was listening to Helmut, I was already thinking, how can I get my hands on these 5,000 recipes? But I think if you were to ask me what I hold to be the most important part of my research, it is exactly that, Andrea. It is exactly that it constitutes the beginning of many other ways of exploiting the recipes, because as I said, I'm not looking at syntax and so on, but how can it be linked, and my vision is actually to create, and this is very much linked to Relish, is to create a recipe map that really chronicles and tries to explain, as well as provide robust quantitative data to support these explanations of how dishes moved around, not for kind of trivial reasons like who influenced whom, but simply how tastes varied and why, and chronological changes, and then linking that to a broader context. I think in terms of historical significance, that would be a beautiful thing. But the linking, the in-depth one, and also there's a it has to be a very, very small group of people that are doing this. So in terms of databases, I mean, I was actually, one of the questions I was going to ask Helmut is, what happened to the French recipes? So here we have a big project. So the only limitations are the number of people involved in the research. That really is our biggest problem, because we can go as wide and we can come up with as many ways as we like, but we still need, and that of course is the one limitation. We need the data, and we need enough data, and there's just not enough data around, but hopefully Relish will at least contribute to that. But for me, that is the most significant thing.
Can I follow up with one question? We don't have that much, so we'll take one more over there. But before we get there, can I just quickly ask? So in that kind of sort of where we take this kind of relationship and so on, it feels like if the digital part is kind of the answer, and you think about the afterlife of a project like ours, where would you situate this? Is this culture or is this technology? And I think that, I mean, part of our conversations in kind of matching or finding resources to do this kind of work, we were kind of not understanding where that kind of work fit. because I think that in the technical description, it kind of felt like, is this computer science? Is this engineering? Is this somewhere? And then in order to explain its use, you had to go into sort of cultural heritage, humanities, and so on. And on paper, that kind of reconciliation was not very convincing, I guess. And I think that I found kind of in our conversations that was one of the biggest challenges. So if that remains the task, then what's the step to not justify it, but like where would you situate it in the making of it? So if we have ingredients prepping and like what is this step?
It's your project.
No. I mean, I think this is.
Well, can I answer that? At least the beginning of the answer. I think
No,
you already, your
is
premise,
wrong.
I
Yeah.
don't agree with your premise.
Okay, all right.
Because that is exactly the thinking that's preventing because you say, is this computer science? Is this computer linguistics?
Yeah.
Is this anthropology? That is what is stopping, in fact, progress in this field. And that's why I forget that the question about the pushback things, it was you with the pushback. If there's any pushback, it is, in fact, that people think in these boxes. And in the same way that digital humanities is mentioned as some separate field, it's not a separate field. Everybody in this room does digital humanities, and these are just tools that we can use. So I think that's why I say, with all due respect, the premise is wrong. And
right.
Once you have that premise, you are boxed in literally, and you then think, oh my God, I can't do this. Whereas you have to. There's no limitations. There's no borders. It is simply the recipes, the ingredients,
right.
and the people.
Yeah.
But when you match against funding calls, and you have to match it, and it is a boxing game, that's what I'm talking about. Like in what way do you make this broadening of the... Because, one of the biggest things that you face when you put this kind of project is these project sits here is justified to be here. Are you a pillar 2? Are you a pillar 6? Or whatever pillar it is, right? So I think it's that mismatch kind of identification that we know what we're trying to do, but the physical boundaries of our access to do this kind of work is very limited.
Unless you look at it from the other side of the lens.
Okay.
The other side of the lens is to focus on the outputs. Yeah. What is it that you produce? And that is very recognizable. That is very accessible. You don't need to know what we've discussed in order to see the benefit and above all the importance of the data that we're providing. So I think that is how you get, that's the hook, that's the handle. And how you get there at the end of the day, they don't care. It's what you're able to produce. And in fact, in many ways, with these tools, you can produce something because we live in a digital world. Helmut's been saying it all of it's once you have it in digital format. So there's all manner of tools that you can then apply to make it accessible. It can be a fantastic teaching tool. You can make videos, animations where different ingredients, there's so many wonderful things that can be done. But if you focus on the tools, then you're absolutely right. You probably wouldn't find a core because you wouldn't be techie enough for the computer science, and you would be too techie for the humanities people. So,
now I have to chime in. The big banner you have over the research we're doing or the project you're having is food studies.
Yeah.
And under this umbrella, under this banner, you have different approaches how you get to your results, and this is absolutely right. You have to publish them, and this is the product, and this is what you have to sell. Starting with maybe recipe databases to the digital methodology and methods you used. This is another output, maybe some kind of training you can put along to the methods. And with these outputs, you get a broad range of product you can put in your boxes.
Yeah. And we have made the case. I mean, we are here, right?
Yeah.
But I'm thinking that in those next steps, one of these conversations is precisely, so do you, in order to make this case, do you go for like open democracy, democratic society calls, you know, and you're like, okay, if anything goes here, so you make that case, because, you know, it's one thing to kind of find a way to put into practice these ideas, like if you need time, if you need people and you need resources, it's not so much about the outcomes, but how you frame the question that is relevant to do all sorts of these works, right? So that's sort of like thinking just in the future scenario. But Simone, there was a question over there.
Yeah.
We'll take that question and wrap up. Yes, sorry. But we can continue this at dinner.
Yeah, sure.
That's gossip for later.
Maybe over dinner.
We'll give some wine.
Okay,
Yes.
yep, thank you. I'll try to be brief. So thank you for these talks. I think what I found very, very valuable and very inspiring about them was being shown this very comprehensive and very, being built by yourselves way to break down these historical documents into their, the constituting parts. And my question was also with regards to the future. And now that they have this large corpus of data, what are your ideas for metadata that can be, added to this to this corpus? And for example, like my first instinct was to understand, okay, how are these, constituting little bits and pieces arranged within the text? How are they presented graphically within the manuscript? And I wanted to ask you if, first of all, from the technical side, if you see it as something plausible, as something that may be, in the near future, and even if it is or if it isn't, what excites you about this possibility of adding metadata to the data that already exists?
We have added metadata in the most basic metadata for the three elements I have, which have the Q numbers attached, is the English translation. So we have the historical term and the English term. This is what is in the text. What is in the text as a metadata datum is also the Q number, and taking this Wikidata Q number, you can go anywhere in the linked open data universe and put together whatever data you want. We did it with information on flavor and aroma for certain recipes. You can read it in the paper. But the output was really, really exciting because on the one hand, we counted different groups of flavor molecules, which led us to spider plots as how recipes would look like on a flavor profile. On the other hand, we had a verbal description of those flavors, and we got a word cloud depicting the recipe. And this is really exciting because it's a completely different view on the historical source. I'm not sure if it helps, but it is exciting.
Yeah, I could agree more. In fact, the flavor thing, I've got two that I have in mind. One, in fact, is indeed the flavors, and the reason that was an obvious one is because, once again, when we talk about flavors and profiles, it's very Eurocentric. And if you, even how we describe the flavor of food is very Eurocentric. Medieval scholars had a very different, so people like Avicenna and so on, had a very different perception of flavors, had different names for them. Some are similar to ours, but their interpretation was often very, very different. So that's one thing. And the second one, which is an obvious one to me, I don't know to what extent it is with Helmut, I think in some case, because he mentioned it, is of course to link it to the medical corpora. So, for instance, my idea would be to have a text or to have ingredients, and then again, thinking in very practical terms, because I want this to be a tool, I want this, as many people as possible to have access to this, is where you could have an ingredient, and this could then lead you to how it was used in dietetics, in medicine, pharmacology, and of course, once you have that, then you can, and when you're staying in the Middle Ages, this would work beautifully because, of course, the Galenic framework continued in Europe because it was essentially the Islamic framework. So those are two that come to mind that I think not only are very relevant, but also very feasible. And I think that the tools are already there to allow us to do that.
Thank you so much. And we're going to end on the note of feasibility, take something positive. Thank you so much, everyone, for a long day. Great presentation.